Dawn arrived without warmth. It came pale and procedural, sliding over concrete the way a file is slid across a desk without ceremony, without invitation. The riverfront pool sat between a retaining wall and a chain-link fence topped with a curl of steel wire, its geometry exact, its purpose controlled. The water was already chlorinated, already still, already waiting. He entered without spectacle. The black man lowered himself down the metal ladder with care, one hand on each rail, shoes aligned on the concrete behind him. The ladder groaned softly under his weight, a small mechanical complaint that echoed and then vanished. When his feet touched the water, there was no gasp, just a pause, a calibration. Then he submerged, pushing forward into the lane. The first stroke was deliberate, long, economical. His body cut a straight line through the pool, arms extending fully before pulling back with practiced restraint. No splash beyond necessity, no wasted motion. Each turn at the wall was precise, palm flat, knees tucked, body pivoting cleanly, returning to the surface with measured breath. He swam as if time itself were a variable he had learned to control. Around him, the environment watched. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly above the pool deck, remnants of the night shift, their glow slightly to white for morning. Signs lined the fence and walls in identical fonts: nitrogen monoxide diving, swim at your own risk, pool hours strictly enforced. The rules were laminated, bolted in place, repeated at intervals as if repetition itself were a form of authority. The lifeguard towers stood empty, their red paint chipped, their ladders angled toward the water like unasked questions. Surveillance cameras blinked intermittently, lenses dark and unblinking, mounted high enough to imply objectivity. The pool was public. The pool was regulated. The pool was never alone. He reached the far end again, turned, pushed off. His breathing followed a strict pattern every third stroke, a brief rotation of the head, mouth clearing the surface just enough to take in air before returning to the waterline. The rhythm was steady, almost monastic. It suggested training, habit, a refusal to rush. On the perimeter, a patrol car rolled to a stop. It did not arrive loudly. No siren, no urgency, just the soft crunch of tires on gravel and the click of an engine settling into idle. The officer remained seated for a moment, forearm resting on the door, gaze drifting across the pool as part of a broader scan. This was a routine route, a predictable stretch of concrete and fence. Then the gaze paused from a distance. The swimmer was only movement, a shape interrupting the water's surface. The officer narrowed his eyes slightly, not yet suspicious, just attentive. Early morning hours had a way of sharpening certain instincts. Shapes were rarely neutral before sunrise. They demanded classification. The officer stepped out of the car. Boots met concrete with a dull finality. He adjusted his belt of practice motion. Subconscious hand began walking along the fence line. His radio murmured once, then fell silent. The swimmer completed another lap, unaware or uninterested in the presence beyond the fence. From this angle, the officer could see the man's shoulders rise and fall with each breath. The muscles were controlled, not showy. There was no thrashing, no erratic movement. Still, the officer slowed his pace. Who swims this early? The question did not form fully, but its implications settled in. The pool rules were posted. Hours were listed clearly. Dawn sat at the edge of compliance, close enough to be arguable, close enough to justify inquiry. The officer stopped near a sign mounted at chest height. He read it without really reading it. His reflection stared back at him from the water's surface, distorted by ripples. The swimmer passed beneath that reflection, the image breaking apart and reforming. The officer's hand rested near his holster, not gripping it, not drawing, just present, a reminder of weight and option. His posture shifted slightly, shoulders squaring, feet planted wider apart, authority settling into the body. The swimmer reached the wall again, turned, pushed off. He had noticed the officer by now. The change in rhythm was subtle, almost imperceptible, a fraction of a second longer at the wall. A breath held just a beat more. He did not look directly at the fence. He did not break form. Discipline held. Water carried sound poorly. The hum of the lights blurred. The city beyond the fence traffic, distant voices was reduced to a low, constant murmur. Inside the pool, the world narrowed to breath and stroke and the steady pressure of water against skin. The officer took another step closer to the fence. He was close, enough now to see the man's face when he turned to. Breathe, calm, focused, eyes forward. No panic, no display. That calm did not reassure him. It complicated the assessment. Stillness can be read as defiance when the system expects noise. The officer cleared his throat, a small sound swallowed by open air. He did not speak yet. He watched. He waited. The swimmer continued, unbroken, each lap identical to the last. Repetition as resolve. A gull cried somewhere above the river. The light shifted slightly, climbing higher, flattening shadows against the concrete. The pool remained unchanged. Its lines were fixed, its rules immutable. From above, from the imagined distance of the cameras, the scene would appear orderly. One swimmer, one officer, a public space functioning as designed. No raised voices, no visible conflict. But order was not neutrality, it was alignment. The swimmer touched the wall again and paused, hands gripping the edge, chest rising as he took in a deeper breath. Water streamed down his arms, pooling briefly at his elbows before falling back into the lane. He remained there, suspended between motion and rest. The officer stood on the other side of the fence, posture rigid, gaze fixed. Between them, concrete, steel, water. Policy. The moment stretched, not dramatic, not loud, just held. A silence dense enough to register, heavy enough to matter. Beyond the pool, the city continued its slow waking. Beyond the fence, signs repeated their warnings. Beyond the moment, systems waited patiently, confident in their entrance. And from above, from far enough away, the scene resolved into geometry, a rectangle of water, a line of fence, a figure in uniform, a body in motion contained, observed, never truly free. The officer broke the silence with movement. He stepped closer to the fence, close enough now that the metal grid cut his face into segments when seen through it. His radio crackled once, an automated check-in from somewhere unseen, then went quiet again. The sound lingered longer than it should have, as if the air itself were reluctant to let it go. Sir, the word was not loud. It did not need to be. It was shaped by training, sharpened to carry authority without volume. It landed on the water and spread outward in small ripples. The swimmer did not respond immediately. He remained at the wall, hands still gripping the edge, elbows locked, shoulders steady. Water slid down his back in thin, controlled streams. His breathing was audible now, slow, deliberate, unhurried. He did not turn his head. The officer waited a fraction of a second longer than protocol required, then continued. Double quote, sir, you need to exit the pool. No greeting, no explanation, just instruction. The swimmer exhaled through his nose. He released the edge with one hand, then the other, and pushed himself upright. The movement was careful, almost ceremonial. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. He placed his feet against the wall and stood, waterline settling at his waist. Only then did he look toward the fence. Their eyes met through steel and distance. The officer's gaze was sharp, evaluative, already moving ahead of the moment. The swimmer's was level, neither aggressive nor submissive, present. I need you out of the water, now. The word now was clipped, stressed, as if urgency could be manufactured by tone alone. The swimmer nodded once. A small motion contained. He turned away from the fence and reached for the ladder. His hands closed around the rails, fingers firm, knuckles pale against wet metal. As he climbed, water spilled from him in steady rivulets, darkening the concrete below. Each step left a footprint clear, temporary, already beginning to fade at the edges. The officer moved in parallel along the fence line, matching pace. His boots scraped against the concrete, a harsh sound that cut through the softer ambient noise of morning. His shoulders were squared now, his stance widened. Authority had fully settled into his body. Keep your hands where I can see them. The swimmer paused at the top of the ladder. He did not argue. He did not ask why. He simply adjusted, lifting his hands slightly away from his sides, palms open, fingers relaxed. Water dripped from them in slow, rhythmic drops. Yes, he said. It was the first word he had spoken. It did not change anything. The officer unlatched the gate with a sharp metallic click and stepped onto the pool deck. The space between them collapsed instantly. What had been observed from a distance was now close enough to touch, close enough to misinterpret. The swimmer stood barefoot on the concrete, posture straight, chin level. His swim cap was dark, pulled low, goggles resting against his forehead. He did not reach for them. He did not fidget. Stillness radiated from him, not as compliance, but as control. The officer's hand hovered near his holster again. Turn around. The command came faster this time, less measured. The swimmer turned. The movement was slow, precise. He rotated his entire body rather than twisting at the waist, keeping his balance centered. His hands remained visible. His breathing remained steady. The officer took another step closer. Do you have identification on you? Yes. Where is it? In my bag. By the bench. The bench sat several yards away, beneath a posted sign listing pool regulations in block letters. The swimmer's bag was small, dark, zipped closed. It rested neatly beneath the bench, aligned rather than tossed. The officer's eyes flicked to it, then back to the swimmer. Do not move. The swimmer stopped. Silence returned, thicker than before. The hum of the light seemed louder now, more insistent. Somewhere beyond the fence, a car door slammed. The city continued, indifferent. The officer's breathing had changed, shorter, faster. His gaze kept shifting hands, shoulders, bag, face searching for something that refused to appear. Fear does not always announce itself. Sometimes it hides behind procedure. The officer's fingers closed around the grip of his weapon. The sound of it clearing the holster was unmistakable. Leather giving way, metal exposed, a clean, practiced motion executed countless times in training. Rarely in reality, the swimmer felt it before he fully registered it, the subtle shift in air. The way the officer's presence sharpened, condensed. Sir, the officer said, voice tighter now. Do not turn around. The swimmer froze. He stood with his back to the officer, hands still visible, shoulders relaxed but unmoving. Water continued to drip from his body, forming a small, irregular pool at his feet. The wet footprints behind him marked his path from the ladder, a visible record of compliance. The gun came up, not shaking, not wavering. Centered, aimed. The officer's badge caught the early light, the metal flashing briefly as he adjusted his stance. The symbol of authority gleamed, pristine, untouched by doubt. The swimmer closed his eyes for a moment, not in surrender, in containment. He inhaled slowly through his nose, then exhaled through his mouth. The breath was controlled, measured, deliberate, a practiced act of restraint. Why are you here? The officer demanded. The question came late, after escalation had already occurred. Curiosity arriving only once force was established. The swimmer did not answer immediately. Silence stretched again, heavy and deliberate. It pressed against the officer's patience, against the rigid structure of the moment. The swimmer's calm did not diffuse the tension. It resisted it, refused to meet fear with fear. I swim here, he said finally. The simplicity of the statement landed awkwardly, inadequate to the weight it was expected to carry. The officer tightened his grip. From a distance from the imagined vantage point of the cameras, mounted high above the scene was clean, composed, a uniformed officer following protocol. A man halted mid-motion, a weapon drawn, but not fired. Order, preserved, but frozen in that moment. With the gun aimed and the swimmer standing barefoot on wet concrete, the truth was stark and unadorned. This was not about behavior. It was about perception, about how quickly neutrality dissolved when filtered through institutional fear. The water behind them lay still again, its surface smooth, reflective, offering no answers, and the system, patient and confident, watched itself work. The swimmer broke the stillness with a breath. It was not a gasp. It was not defiance. It was simply air moving in and out of a body that refused to be rushed into error. He stood exactly as instructed, feet planted on the wet concrete, hands still visible at his sides. The gun remained trained on the center of his back, a fixed point of pressure he did not acknowledge with movement. I'm going to reach for my identification, he said. The words were measured, spaced evenly, each one placed with care. Not a plea, not a warning, a statement of intent. The officer did not respond immediately. His eyes narrowed, tracking the swimmer's shoulders, the subtle shift of muscle beneath skin. The badge on his chest rose and fell with his breath, faster now, less controlled. The muzzle of the gun dipped a fraction, then corrected itself, slow. The officer said. The swimmer nodded once. He moved exactly as instructed, slowly. His right hand lifted first, palm open, fingers spread. He rotated his torso just enough to make the movement visible, then reached back toward the small bag beneath the bench. Each inch of motion was deliberate, announced by posture alone. He did not rush the zipper. He did not fumble. The sound of the zipper opening was loud in the quiet. Inside the bag, his hand closed around a flat object sealed in clear plastic. He withdrew it with 2 fingers, holding it away from his body, arm extended slightly to the side. I'm going to turn, he said. The officer's jaw tightened. Turn. He echoed. Though the word sounded less like command now and more like permission, the swimmer pivoted. He faced the officer fully. Shoulders square, feet still bare and wet against the concrete. The ID badge hung from his fingers, suspended in the space between them. The plastic sleeve caught the light, reflected it cleanly, without distortion. 3 letters were visible immediately. FBI. They were printed in bold, unambiguous type. Not stylized, not decorative. Institutional. Final. The officer's body reacted before his mind did. He took a step back. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was real. The gun wavered, then lowered slightly, no longer centered on the swimmer's body. His shoulders collapsed inward, posture breaking under the sudden recalibration of threat. The swimmer did not move. He held the badge steady, arms still extended, face unreadable. His breathing remained even, the rise and fall of his chest unchanged. The calm that had been interpreted as suspicious now revealed itself as something else entirely. Control. The officer stared at the badge, then at the swimmer's face, then back to the badge again. The sequence repeated, faster each time, as if repetition might change the outcome. You're. The officer stopped himself, swallowed, started again. You're federal? The swimmer nodded once. Yes. The word was quiet, absolute. Silence flooded the space. It was not the silence of waiting this time. It was the silence of collapse, of assumptions folding in on themselves, of authority discovering its own conditional nature. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, indifferent, their sound suddenly intrusive. The officer lowered the gun fully. The motion was clumsy now, unpracticed. The weapon dipped toward the ground, barrel angled away. No longer a tool of certainty, but an object that needed to be put somewhere safe. His hand shook as he reholstered it, leather resisting slightly before giving way. I didn't. He began, then stopped. The sentence had nowhere to go. The swimmer finally lowered his arm, clipping the badge back onto a lanyard around his neck. The plastic sleeve rested against his chest, the letters still visible, still doing their work. I asked you to exit the pool, the officer said. Reflexively, the words sounded wrong the moment they left his mouth. Too late, too small, too procedural for what had already occurred. The swimmer said nothing. He stood there, water drying slowly on his skin, leaving faint white lines of chlorine behind. His posture did not change. He did not advance. He did not retreat. The dignity he had maintained under threat did not transform into triumph. Now that the threat had receded, the officer cleared his throat. I wasn't aware, he said. Again. The sentence collapsed under its own weight. Awareness had never been the issue. The officer adjusted his belt, then his badge, then his stance, as if resetting his body might reset the moment. His eyes no longer searched for danger. They searched for footing, for language that might reestablish equilibrium. The swimmer waited. Silence became a mirror in it. The officer saw the sequence replayed without mercy. The command, the gun, the pause. The badge had not erased those moments. It had only reframed them. The swimmer had not become safer. He had become legible. I need to notify my supervisor, the officer said finally. Yes. The swimmer replied. Nothing else followed. The officer turned away briefly, speaking into his radio in a low voice. Codes were exchanged. Names withheld. The swimmer remained in place, the badge visible. The water at his feet evaporating slowly under the rising sun. From above, from the distant vantage point of cameras and systems, the scene appeared resolved. The weapon was down. The man stood unharmed. Procedure had found its correction, but the truth lay in the object that had shifted everything. The badge. It did not represent justice. It represented hierarchy. It revealed the boundary between those who were granted the presumption of legitimacy and those who must earn it moment by moment, breath by breath. The swimmer had been the same man before and after its display, calm, composed, lawful. Only the system's posture had changed, and as the morning light strengthened, reflecting off plastic and metal, the pool returned to stillness, bearing quiet witness to the fact that safety, like authority, was never evenly distributed. The building had no memory of daylight. It sat several blocks from the riverfront, a low concrete structure whose windows, if they existed at all, were narrow and recessed, designed to admit light without inviting visibility. Inside, the air was cooler than necessary, conditioned to neutrality. Corridors ran straight and unadorned, their walls painted a color chosen to discourage reflection. The room was already prepared. A rectangular table occupied the center, its surface laminated, unmarked, for plastic chairs were placed around it with careful symmetry. Legs aligned to invisible grid lines in the tile floor. At one end of the table sat a small recording device, red light dark for now. The paper cups of water stood beside it, untouched. Their lids still sealed. Fluorescent bulbs hummed overhead. The swimmer entered first. He was dry now, dressed in neutral clothing, dark slacks, a plain shirt. The FBI badge hung clipped to his belt, visible but no longer foregrounded. He did not look around the room with curiosity. He assessed it once, then took the chair opposite the recorder. He folded his hands on the table, fingers interlaced, posture upright but unforced. A chair scraped softly across the floor behind him. The officer entered with less certainty. His uniform appeared stiffer here, more constricting. He chose the chair farthest from the swimmer, positioning himself slightly back, slightly angled. Distance reasserted itself as defense. The supervisors followed, both in suits, both carrying folders already thick with paper. They nodded to the swimmer first. "Thank you for coming in," one of them said. The courtesy was precise, deliberate. The swimmer inclined his head. The officer was acknowledged. Second, briefly, the recording device was switched on. The red light bloomed to life, steady and unwavering. Time began to move differently. Names were stated for the record, dates confirmed, locations clarified. The language was careful, sanitized, stripped of emotion. Words like perception, procedure, standard response were deployed with practiced ease. Each term acted as a buffer, absorbing impact. The swimmer spoke when asked. His answers were concise, factual. He described the morning without embellishment, the water temperature, the time he entered the pool, the commands issued. When he spoke of the gun, he did not raise his voice. He did not pause for effect. He simply named it. The room absorbed the words. The supervisors nodded, pens moving steadily. One of them slid a cup of water closer to the swimmer, a gesture of care so small it was almost invisible. He did not touch it. The officer's turn came. He shifted in his chair, cleared his throat. His account was longer, less linear. He spoke of policy, of early morning patrols, of situational awareness. He referenced the swimmer's presence as unexpected, the hour as unusual. He described his own fear without naming it as such. At no point, he said, "Did I intend?" The sentence trailed off, replaced by a different one. "I was following protocol." The phrase landed heavily. Protocol became the room's anchor. It was invoked repeatedly, examined, circled. The supervisors asked questions not about judgment, but about sequence. What was said first? What was seen? What was perceived? The swimmer listened, hands still folded, posture unchanged. Silence became his contribution. It was not absence. It was refusal. The officer filled the gaps eagerly, offering clarifications that sounded increasingly defensive. He adjusted his chair, his badge, his tone. Each adjustment was an attempt to regain balance in a space that no longer belonged to him. At one point, the supervisor closest to the swimmer looked up. "Did you feel threatened?" she asked. The swimmer considered the question. "Yes," he said. The word was quiet, final. The officer flinched. No one rushed to soften it. The recording device captured everything: the hum of the lights, the faint buzz of electricity, the space between breaths. The cup of water near the swimmer remained untouched, condensation forming slowly along its sides. When the meeting ended, it did so without resolution. Statements would be reviewed, procedures evaluated, follow-up scheduled. The language suggested movement while promising none. Chairs scraped back into place. The red light on the recorder went dark. The swimmer stood. So did the officer, though a moment later. As if timing itself had been recalibrated, they did not look at each other. In the hallway outside, the swimmer paused briefly. He clipped his badge more securely to his belt, the motion small but deliberate. The supervisor thanked him again, this time with a nod that bordered on deference. The officer lingered behind, speaking quietly to another supervisor. His voice was low, indistinct, already being translated into memos and reports. The building exhaled. From above, from the vantage point of files and databases, the incident began its transformation. It became an entry, a case number, a sequence of actions to be reviewed and archived. Language was applied like antiseptic, sealing the wound without probing its cause. The room, without windows, returned to stillness. The chairs remained aligned. The cups of water sat untouched until someone cleared them away. The fluorescent lights continued their steady hum. illuminating a space designed to process conflict without absorbing its weight. Outside, the day moved on. Inside the system, the moment was already being metabolized, broken down, categorized, stored. Not erased, not resolved, contained. And in that containment lay the quiet certainty that while individuals might be shaken, the structure itself would remain unchanged, intact, waiting patiently for the next incident to pass through its doors. The briefing room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. Rows of chairs faced a narrow podium bearing a seal polished to dull perfection. Behind it, a blue backdrop repeated the department's name in uniform spacing. Letters aligned as if alignment itself were evidence of control. Microphones clustered together, their cords coiled neatly. Waiting. The spokesperson spoke carefully. "This incident," she said, "is under review." The phrase was delivered with practiced calm, neither apologetic nor defensive. Questions followed about protocol, about timing, about training. Each answer was constructed from the same materials: reassurance without admission, concern without consequence. "We take these matters seriously." No names were spoken, no motives examined. The swimmer was referred to as an individual, the officer as the responding party. The language created distance, insulating the system from the specificity of what had occurred. There was no outrage in the room, no applause. Pens scratched, cameras clicked. The story was recorded, compressed into a segment that would air between weather and traffic. Then the room emptied. Days passed. The swimmer returned to the pool on a morning indistinguishable from the first. Dawn arrived pale and procedural, sliding across concrete without warmth. The chain-link fence remained intact. The signs were unchanged, their laminated warnings bolted firmly in place. One addition stood out. A new camera had been installed above the far lifeguard tower, its housing glossy, its lens angled slightly downward. It blinked once, red light steady, then resumed its quiet watch. The swimmer paused at the gate. He scanned the space not with suspicion, but with recognition. This place had not changed because it had not needed to. Its authority was already sufficient. He entered, closed the gate behind him, and set his bag beneath the same bench, shoes aligned, towel folded. He descended the ladder. The water accepted him without comment. The first stroke cut the surface cleanly. The second followed. The rhythm returned almost immediately, as if stored somewhere deeper than memory. Arms extended, pulled, recovered, breath taken on every third stroke, precise and unhurried. From the perimeter, a different patrol car idled. The officer inside was not the same one. This officer watched briefly, then turned away, attention drawn elsewhere. The swimmer completed his lap uninterrupted. The reassigned officer was now several miles away, filling out reports in a different building, walking a different route. He had not been fired. He had not been transformed. His career continued, adjusted slightly, recalibrated just enough to suggest responsiveness. The system had absorbed the shock. The swimmer reached the wall and turned. The water reflected the rising light, breaking it into fragments that danced across the concrete. The camera above tracked the movement automatically, its internal motor adjusting with a faint whir. Observation had been upgraded. Understanding had not. He swam on. Each lap was identical to the last. Discipline repeated itself, not for performance, not for spectacle, but for continuity. His body remembered what his environment refused to acknowledge. There were no onlookers this time, no confrontation, no audible commands cutting across the water. The absence of drama was not relief. It was confirmation. The pool functioned as designed. When he finished, he climbed out slowly, water streaming from his arms, leaving wet footprints that mapped his exit. They faded quickly in the warming air, temporary evidence of presence. He dried his hands, retrieved his badge, clipped it to his belt. The letters were visible, but no one was there to see them. Beyond the fence, traffic increased. The city resumed its rhythm. Somewhere, a different incident was already forming, waiting for its moment to surface. From a distance, from the elevated vantage point of policy and pattern, the scene resolved into familiarity. A man swims, a system watches, a story passes through public consciousness and is replaced. What remained was not resolution, but persistence. The swimmer paused once more at the gate before leaving. He did not look back at the water. He did not acknowledge the camera. His posture was unchanged, his movements deliberate. Dignity, here, was not granted. It was maintained. And as the morning fully claimed the day, the pool returned to stillness, its surface smooth, reflective. offering no commentary, only a quiet reminder that while incidents echo briefly, structures endure, and the burden of restraint is still borne by those least protected by the rules that surround them.